So my script is still good morning, and welcome to the Community and Health Services Committee for August the 15th. And just a reminder, as previously, that all our votes are going to be taken on eScribe if your devices are working. I'd like to now call on Julie to roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann. Chair Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Present. Councillor McCabe. Present. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Shawns.
Present.
Councillor Rubvanovich.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
Here.
And Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. As we begin this meeting, we again remind ourselves that our homes and places of employment are situated on the land that is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe and neutral people. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection to Waterloo region, and we also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and reaffirm our collective commitment to keep the promise and the challenge of truth and reconciliation real and intentional in our region. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor James.
Yes, I have an indirect pecuniary interest on item 6.3 on the closed agenda because an immediate family member is involved with the project.
Thank you. We have no presentations, no delegations. The consent agenda. If you wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate to do so now. We'll take no questions on consent items unless items are requested to be removed to the regular agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda will be dealt with in one motion. Are there any items that you wish to be removed from the consent agenda? Do we have a mover and a seconder to approve the consent report listed on the agenda under item 6? Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Wolf. All those in favor, use your eScribe buttons to indicate so, please. That's carried. Councillor Wolf, you're in favor. Okay. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Ms. Cardo. In case there were some questions, good news on this money that we got from the province. It sort of goes back to the request that was made earlier about a chair writing a letter. If I recall, there was some correspondence of a letter that Chair Redmond had written supporting this, and so good work to everybody on this. Thank you. To our regular agenda now, item number 7, the strategic focus on a thriving economy. Mishmira Russell is here and will speak to this report.
Thank you very much. So this is a report on recommendations for funding allocations from the Cultural Drivers of Tourism Grant Program that Council approved back in May. We received 23 applications, 20 of which were eligible for funding. We have, so applications came in from organizations across the region. The grant calculations have been, the grant recommendations have been made based on calculations that were outlined in the approved guidelines based on the budget that was set. So we're proposing an allocation of $163-ish thousand to 20 organizations. You will note that 2 organizations, the Cambridge Highland Games as well as Oktoberfest, have received the same amount of funding that they have received in the past. That was outlined in the guidelines, and they will be slowly transitioned to any new amounts as they continue to apply through this program. The other thing that's worth noting is that this is designed as an incentive program rather than necessarily an operating grant, even though organizations can apply year after year. So that does allow us to provide grant funding to public art galleries who are currently, following a decision of council back in the year 2000, not eligible to receive operating funding from the region. I think that generally summarizes where we're at.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Wolf?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, Helen, for the report. When you were looking at the grants, did you look at all at the distribution between the cities and townships? I just noticed Cambridge, again, not as many, and I do know some people, at least one Cambridge resident who was refused funding. So I just wondered if there's anything in the criteria that we need to look at, or what your thoughts are here.
Okay, thank you for the question. So through the chair, from our observation, it was a fairly broad spread. Would have been eligible who didn't apply for funding, and we'll continue to work with area municipalities. We did this year. We'll continue to work with them as well as explore Waterloo region to get the word out better for next year to try to encourage more applications. In this case, there were 3 organizations that were not eligible. 2 are currently receiving operating funding under the major arts and culture organizations, so they were not eligible to apply. And there was one other one who was not actually doing cultural activities, and so was therefore not eligible to receive funding under this grant program. So the way that the guidelines are currently set out is it's a recognition that cultural activities bring in visitors from outside of the region, and so there was one organization who didn't meet the criteria that was outlined about actually undertaking cultural activity as it was defined in the guidelines.
Thank you.
Councillor Schatz?
Thank you. Can you just help me understand exactly what you're looking for in this? And I know we've gone over it before, but I just want to point out Neruda Arts and the Culture and Festival, and wonder if those are 2 separate pieces, because I don't see them here, and I know that they do bring in a lot of people. So could you just clarify that for me?
Absolutely. So through the chair, Neruda Arts is the organization. The Culture and Festival is the activity that they run. They are currently receiving an operating grant through the Major Arts and Culture Grant Program. So it's an operating grant that they received, was approved back in, I'm going to say June. So that made them ineligible for this current program because we put in the guidelines that it's to avoid allocation from multiple programs to a single organization. So I can go back and refer back to what they actually received for their operating grant. So it's certainly not it's not a commentary on the fact that that organization doesn't bring in a tremendous number a tremendous amount of value to the community as far as artistic activity goes, and we also recognize that they bring in visitors from outside of the region, and we can certainly look at which program would be more suitable and where they'd be able to leverage more funding. This year, looking at the numbers they had and the allocation that we already provided, they were better suited in the major arts and cultural organizations and received a larger grant through that program than they would have through this one.
So you're looking at the organization as opposed to individual events?
Correct. So that's how the eligibility currently works, right? So there are different streams that you can come through to access funding, and at the moment, Neruda Arts is being funded through major arts and cultural organizations, even though they do run a festival activity.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thanks for this report, Helen. I'm just wondering, at the risk of, I don't know if this is the right time or not, but I'm just wondering, because we're talking about funding these, and there's galleries involved here, if this motion should be amended to enable galleries to apply for operating funding rather than just this one-time ongoing funding. Like you said, many of these agencies or organizations receive it year over year. So why not? Why should we just amend our practice and maybe this motion to say, and to enable, in this case, it's galleries, to apply for operating funding?
Thank you for the question. So through the chair, yes, there's an opportunity for council if they wish to change a decision that they've made previously. This is certainly an opportunity where that could take place. So back in 2000, like I said, the council at the time made a resolution, had a decision of council that public art galleries were considered at the time an area municipal responsibility and were not to receive funding, operating funding from the region of Waterloo. It is certainly up to this council if they choose to make a different decision. That can certainly be done right now if that's something they want to do, and that would make a new starting point, a new direction from council moving forward.
So then with that, can I make a motion or make an amendment to that motion?
I'm sorry, I was distracted on another, we have a hard stop at 12 o'clock. And so I'm wondering if we can, if we could redo or begin this conversation after our hard stop, after lunch, if we could come back with that. Does that work?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've set hard stops for a very good reason. So I think we should adhere to it. Yeah.
So proceed. We don't have a motion for this one, so can we just reconvene or just adjourn?
We're just recessing.
Yeah, okay. So what we'll do is recess now for our hard stop at 12 o'clock, if that's okay, and then pick up this agenda item when we come back. At 12:30, yeah. 12:40, okay. Okay, lunchtime. Again, back to item number 7.1 under Thriving Community, the cultural drivers of tourism and grant funding. We had a conversation after the meeting with Councillor McCabe, who will withdraw her suggested amendment right now and speak to that during the tracking part of the agenda. So we're in a position to move the recommendation that's printed on the agenda under 7.11. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Fox and seconded by Councillor Craig. You use your e-scribe function buttons to vote, please. And that is carried. Oh, not everyone has voted yet? Okay. Pardon? No. Councillor Liggett, you're in favor? Councillor Hunick? Yeah, okay, thanks, Cindy. Yeah. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. On to item 7.2 under strategic focus, the property ownership transfer to the region. Mr. Sweeney is prepared to speak to that, and Mr. Dyer is here as well if there are any questions.
Certainly, maybe just a brief overview, and then happy to answer any questions with the help of my colleague Craig. This is a legacy initiative that was first initiated in about 8 years ago, and it's a program that we set up to allow us to retain some affordable housing units. We did so because at the time the two buildings in question both had outstanding mortgages, which as a municipality we're not allowed to hold. And so the intention now is to move these two properties into the Waterloo Regional Housing Stock formally. Also, just as note, in the report, we made another notation that our intention would be to keep the legal entity that we refer to as ROCI in place as a shell company should we need it again. And if circumstances require us to utilize it again, we have it ready to go. So hopefully pretty straightforward in the report. I want to thank my colleagues for putting this report together in my absence, but happy to answer any questions or give all the hard ones to Craig.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. Could you just explain the difference, why that's done, just for me, please? Like why from one regional entity to another?
So these two buildings, my understanding, came into some operational and governance challenges. And so rather than having them fold into the potentially private market, the region back in 2015 through council made a decision to take them on as part of our WRH housing stock. But because they had mortgages outstanding, and we are not allowed to hold a mortgage, we had to set up a separate corporate entity to hold on to them until we got them to a point of proper repair in terms of our ability to take them in. So it was just a mechanism to protect the affordable housing stock from a legal and financial perspective.
Follow up on that? But it's in the region, it's going into the region of Waterloo's hands so we're not going to put it on the market to a private entity?
Correct. We are just taking it from a corporate entity that we are the owner of that allowed us to hold them with a mortgage, pay down the mortgage, bring them into our regular stock, and then leave that shell company there should circumstances require that we may need to take on another asset in the community.
Okay.
That would be the idea.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Sort of like going from a holding company to the parent company.
Sure.
Yeah.
Craig, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Would you use your e-scribe buttons to vote, please? That is carried. Thank you. Number 8, information correspondence. 8.1, tracking. Councillor McCabe?
Thank you, Chair. Would like to request from staff that they prepare a report that reflects the inclusion of public art galleries in regional operating funds to bring back in September. That's reasonable.
Thank you. And that's treating as direction.
As seen as direction, yes. Thank you.
Any other business under information correspondence? Under 9.1, we have a delegation coming from the Women's Crisis of Waterloo Region in September on the topic of the motion that Councillor Deutschmann had proposed. And so I think Councillor Deutschmann has informed us that he is prepared to defer this motion until that delegation has a chance to speak. If that's correct, Councillor Deutschmann, you want to speak to this or indicate the withdrawal?
No, we'll defer to September. I just wanted to also mention that I think Waterloo Regional Police Services will have a representative as well, and Camino might as well. So I thought it'd be appropriate. They had delegated at the same, sort of we crossed paths with respect to this issue, and I thought it'd be best and appropriate to deal with it at the time when they were here to speak to it.
My mistake, I shouldn't have used withdraw, it's a deferral.
Deferral, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask Commissioner Sweeney to give us an update on a conversation we had earlier on the related to the refugees in our community. He has some additional information from this morning.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I was asked some questions about specific numbers, percentages, and actual values with respect to what we're seeing in the shelter system as it relates to refugees and asylum seekers. So I have some data that I didn't have my hands this morning, so I want to thank the staff. You know who you are. So currently, of individuals currently accessing our shelter system, as of last month, about 10% of those are refugees and asylum seekers. So to give you some whole numbers, that's anywhere between 50 and 55, roughly, unique individuals. Last week, we had 16 families in shelter, and as a reminder, families who are seeking emergency shelter are cared for by our partners at the YW, at the Best Western up in Waterloo. There were 16 families staying there last week. 7 of those were refugee families. What's interesting is 5 individuals accessed the entire system who were refugees or asylum seekers in April, and in July that was 57. And Cambridge Shelter Corp, which was mentioned earlier in some of the questions, they had more intakes of refugees and asylum seekers in July than in the previous 11 months combined. So you might ask, what are we doing? So this is a system that we are part of, but not are fully responsible for. Obviously, the Immigration Partnership is a regionally centered entity under the leadership of Tara Bedard and many of our community partners. Our housing and homeless housing stability staff are meeting regularly with the settlement sector. So these are agencies that are predominantly funded through the federal government and have overall responsibility for settlement services in this community, and recognizing that there needs to be some further coordination. It's a system that's fractured, not only from a housing perspective, but also from a healthcare perspective, from a translation perspective. So there's a lot of work to do that is going to require all of the community. But I did get asked some specific numbers, so I just was reporting back as promised.
Thank you. All the more reason for the application to get into the federal government and the letter from the chair. Thank you. Our next meeting, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up thanks for that information, Peter. The Best Western in Waterloo, do you know what their additional capacity has there? Because they were keeping some of the hotel for hotel guests, but then keeping the rest for what you described. So I'm just wondering, are they running out of space?
My understanding is there's 120 rooms there, and both the YW through the housing stability system that we fund are accessing that, And it's also a place where Reception House through federal funding are all also accessing. I don't have a number on how many of those 120 rooms are being accessed combined between those two, but I believe it's significant. But I don't know the answer. My understanding is yes, but I would have to double check that. I don't know. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you. Our next meeting for the Community and Health Services meeting is September the 12th. Is there a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Craig, seconded by Councillor Salin. Use your e-scribe buttons to vote. Voting yes. Okay. That's it. Or who is it? Councillor Deutschmann, are you?
No, I was adding words by mistake.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. All in favor? We're adjourned. A few minutes to get set up for the next one.